Good afternoon, good morning to everybody. Welcome to this webinar. It's one in the series that we have on various topics that are pertinent to current times. This one, of course, is a close follow-up to the webinar that Kerala, the Kerala Institute of Local Administration had presented their experiences of dealing with the pandemic, keeping the local governments at the center of the initiative. Here we have an experience coming in from Bangladesh. We have Dr. Badiul Majumdar presenting to us the experience that the Hunger Project has been supporting and has been part of. Dr. Majumdar has been a professor for long. He is the Global Vice President and Country Director of the Hunger Project in Bangladesh. He is also the founder and Secretary General of Shujan. He's, of course, Hunger Project Bangladesh is a valued member of the Login Network. And without much ado, I will hand over the floor to Dr. Majumdar. Welcome, Dr. Majumdar. Please take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Preeta, and thank you. I want to thank you as well as all your colleagues for arranging it. And also, I want to welcome everyone. And there are a lot of distinguished people joining today and a lot of distinguished participants from Bangladesh. Warm welcome to everyone. Well, I'll make the presentation. Then after my presentation, our friend, Dr. Junaid Kamal, who is the country director for the World Bank in India, will make intervention to supplement. The agenda for this webinar is that first, I'll present the WHO important guidelines. Those countries which followed those guidelines became star performers. And I will briefly present the success story of Kerala as context, and it won't be main presentation. And then there are poor performers also. Bangladesh is one of those, and I'll present our intervention of Corona resilient villages. Then we'll end the presentation with discussion of learning and way forward. As we know, this coronavirus pandemic is a worldwide phenomenon, and which devastated the lives and livelihoods of a lot of people. And every country is affected, both rich as well as poor. A lot of lives are lost, economies are in shambles, and livelihood destroyed, and these are two connected. As I said, that we'll talk about the WHO guidelines. Those who followed those guidelines did well, and Kerala is one of those, and we'll discuss those. These are the important guidelines for WHO, technical guidelines, and obviously they relate to the preparation, readiness, all the things that you will have to do expecting the outbreak. So these are some of the critical preparedness and surveillance, country level coordination, clinical care, and maintaining essential health services, risk communication and important and community engagement. And we'll be spending more time on that. This is Kerala's case, my understanding of how Kerala did it. The focus is at the local level, and Panchayat played the most important role. You know, Panchayat has deep roots in Kerala. It has not come quickly, and Rome was not built in a day. Because of long effort, Kerala has a strong local government system, Panchayat system. And the local government system, Panchayat, has a disaster plan, every Panchayat. And in the disaster plan, first responder is identified. And in Kerala, what they did was that they expected that it's going to come to Kerala too, the coronavirus. They created a rapid responder team. And rapid responder team is headed by the ward representative of the Gram Panchayat. In that rapid responder team, everybody joined. The state functionaries, health-related all functionaries, Panchayat functionaries, and also all the health professionals that are posted locally. Centrally sponsored schemes such as Kudumbashree, hundreds of thousands of people are associated with those centrally sponsored schemes. They also joined, and they have a large number of volunteers. So all of them worked together under the leadership of the Panchayat representative, and they were part of the rapid response team. And they were trying to contain the virus as well as mitigate the impact of the virus. The way I look at it, they pursued three C's: communication, coordination, planning, and management, and community engagement. These are the three important focus. And in the area of communication, most important thing they did was that awareness raising. And they carried out a campaign of breaking the chain. They used technology, modern technology. Using those, they have really made everybody aware and made everybody follow the health guidelines. This campaign was very, very important. In terms of management, they identified infected persons and did the contact tracing and isolated those who were infected and quarantined those who were suspected of being infected. They had a mobile clinic providing the health services. They distributed essential services, food, medicine. They arranged community kitchen. Through that, they meet the most important requirements of the people. They also distributed medicine. The most important thing that I want to say is that this was a decentralized effort. The pandemic was dealt with at the local level under the leadership of the Panchayat, and everybody worked under the Panchayat. And the state chief minister and his colleagues did briefing every morning, created the relationship of trust. And so there was no trust deficit, and also media helped. This is how they dealt with, and they have very low death rate. They are a star performer, and there are other performers too, such as Vietnam. What is the learning from Kerala? It's a decentralized strategy using LGIs, and it's a coordinated effort. Everybody worked in a coordinated way under the leadership of the Panchayat, and they did the managing, planning, coordination at the local level. Community ownership and engagement was the key. Obviously, they planned ahead and detected early and contained the outbreak quickly and broke the chain. And trust and confidence was very, very important. There was political commitment. State government and the central functionaries also worked together. And they enforced the Kerala Epidemic Disease Control Act. And past experience, they had a flooding in 2018, and that helped them prepare for disasters. So all of these important factors behind Kerala's success. And this is now Bangladesh, broadly speaking. Bangladesh really was not prepared, although there are a lot of statements and we are all ready. But also there are some assumptions made, such as we are a country with warm weather, and warm weather will destroy the virus. At the beginning, as a result of this lack of preparation, they didn't do what needed to be done. For example, there are a lot of people coming from abroad, from Italy and other countries. They were not put in quarantine. They were allowed to go home and be in self-quarantine. That really led to community transmission. And also the government, rather than imposing lockdown, they declared general holidays, and people went and came back, and garment sector was opened early on the 12th. Health directives are not all followed. So that led to the community transmission. Virus spread all over. Another reason why we have not been doing well, full health infrastructure, and there is corruption. And also the government decided to go alone. It was not a national program. It was not a multi-stakeholder effort. And the communication was effective. This communication that people don't abide by guidelines. The community was not involved. In Bangladesh's situation right now, the testing is inadequate. In fact, the number of tests conducted is going down, and the government imposed fees for testing. In the past, there was no fees. Infection rate is increasing even though testing is inadequate. And one feature of Bangladesh is that we have low death rate, and the people don't really abide by the health directives. They don't wear masks in most cases, and physical distancing is also not maintained. And there are a lot of misinformation and disinformation. And for example, this is Allah and God has given it, and if we are to have it, and we'll have it, and we can't do much about it. The people lost confidence in the health system. As a result, a lot of people who are infected are not even going to the hospital. At the beginning, there was crisis. People couldn't get the hospital bed. Now about 72% are vacant. And the government really didn't do an effective job in isolating those who are infected and quarantining those who were suspected of being infected. Well, this is the situation right now. In fact, over 1 million people are tested, confirmed over 200,000, recovered over 100,000, and dead over 2,000. Per million test is about 6,000. And new cases as last week was about 3,000. Recovery rate about 55%. Case fatality rate 1.29. This is how it has been going on. First 87 days, the first 50,000 was detected. Second 50,000 in 16 days, third 50,000 in 14 days, fourth 50,000 in 16 days. It would have been less days. Number of tests conducted has gone down. So this is what is happening. The infection rate, this is weekly rate. We are going upward. So it seems that virus is spreading and there is no approved treatment. Although we hear a lot about the vaccine, we don't know when the vaccine will be available and when we will get it in our countries. So we need to live with it. We need to become resilient. And so we started a Corona Resilient Villages initiative. It's a totally volunteer-driven and community-led, and whole society is involved. This initiative has fallen as manna from heaven. Is leveraged on our SDG Union strategy, which Hunger Project started in 2015. And it involves three-way partnership between people, their elected representatives, and the civil society, a group of volunteers that we mobilized. And this is designed to localize the SDGs. So we have trained and mobilized thousands of volunteers around the country. They created village development teams in their villages to make SDG villages and created what we call the self-help group. So these structures are there, the local structures and volunteers. This is the process we used in creating the Corona Resilient Villages. We use 4-step strategy. We bring home the realization that each one will protect everyone. So if one is infected, everyone is at risk of being infected. Based on that realization, mobilize the whole community. Unlike in Kerala, where the ward member headed the rapid responder team, we do not have such an arrangement. So we created village coronavirus containment and mitigation team, and they really mobilized the villagers. So it's a whole society approach, and it's a self-interest driven approach. If you want to protect yourself, you will have to protect the rest of the community. The second step is risk communication. One of the important focus of the communication is what we call 3W campaign: wearing mask, washing hands, and watching distance. So 3W campaign. And then we also campaigned against misinformation, that because misinformation really discourages people from abiding by the health guidelines. In this pandemic, there are violence against women and child marriage. We have been campaigning against violence against women and child marriage. So the second step is risk communication. The third is patient management. Here, we try to identify, but the volunteers try to identify the people who are infected and try to put them in isolation. And also, they try to get them the medical help, get them tested, although getting tested is not easy from the rural areas. If anybody came from outside in the village, they try to put them in quarantine. People who are identified, they inform the government functionaries that these people are infected. And the people who are infected, there are stigmatization. So there is campaign against stigmatization. So this is our third step. And fourth step is support the poor and those who lost their jobs. Our volunteers made the list of the people who are on the verge of starvation, especially people, women-headed household, families with other vulnerable people, small children, and tried to get them enrolled under the government social protection schemes. So they raised through community philanthropy money as well as other materials. They distributed among the people. Also, the volunteers helped the farmers. This was the season when the rice had to be harvested, and they even helped with the harvesting. So these are the 4 steps that we followed. We work very closely with the local government bodies. They are not mandated to participate in this, but because of our relationship, the members as well as chairs of the Union Parishad has been working with us. And as I said, that this is volunteer-based. We have in the country about 150,000 trained animators, about 10,000 women leaders, so about 30,000 trained youth leaders, but they work with about 100,000 young people. And we have in the villages over 1,200 village development teams, about 1,400 youth units, and we have over 1,100 self-help groups. It includes about 30,000 poorest of the poor, and most of them are women. And we are spread over 8 divisions, District 21, Upazilas 37, and 129 unions. And we have vigorous activities in over 1,200 unions, but we have more unions where there are activities have started. So we are active in about 1,500 villages. So what have we achieved? We have reached about 3 million people, close to 3 million people. And hand washing demonstration was over 100,000. Leaflet distribution was over 100,000. Soap distribution, and then hand sanitizer distribution, disinfectant sprayed in liters, over 100,000 liters. Tubal and mosque, we had soap available. Set up hand washing centers at public places, over 300. Hand washing arrangements in community clinics, campaigns by religious and community leaders to debunk rumors and misinformation. We use the local leaders as well as religious leaders. In the rural markets, there's no physical distancing. So over 200 places, our volunteers were able to impose that distancing requirement. In villages, we identified about 1,300 people who were infected. And then COVID positive persons isolated at home, about 200. And we have positive persons put in institutional quarantine. About 3,000 people came from Dhaka who were quarantined in homes, and 62 persons in institutions. So our volunteers raised about 3,67,000 taka worth of materials, food, and money to distribute through community philanthropy, and about 95,000 families also are supported. So this is some pictures. Next, learning and the technical guidelines of who's need to be followed, and national and multi-stakeholder effort and science-based approach needed, and political commitment, well thought out and well coordinated strategies needed. Behavior change is difficult and time consuming, so we need to use the experts. Misinformation, disinformation needed to be dispelled, and that's a very important important thing that needs to be done. And local leadership of planning, coordination, and monitoring is needed, and community ownership and engagement is absolutely essential, and social mobilization is through volunteers is needed. Community trust rather than mistrust helps people to work together. Next. The last one, way forward. So if this work, which is going well and we're producing results, is this to be upscaled, the government partnership is needed, and greater involvement of the local government is needed, and leaders from different sectors, all sectors of the society need to be involved, and those who conquered Corona also can provide support, and behavioral change will have to be emphasized, CWs, and more testing and isolation needed. Vulnerable groups need to be identified and supported. Volunteers need to be equipped with more technical skills. Urgent attention need to clean up and make the health infrastructure functional. Needs strong emphasis on professional ethics, and there are the allegations that people are not getting service when they went to the hospital. So ethics is very important. That needs to be emphasized. So this basically ends my presentation. I will now ask Junaid Kamal Ahmad, if he's here, to supplement my presentation.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It is very rich and has things that are very important. Let me make some general points and then come to the core point that you're making about the role of local governments and local communities. The first thing I want to say is, around the world, the state governments have been completely taken by surprise. If you take a country like United States, the World Economic Forum a couple of years back did a ranking to say which country would be most ready to deal with panic. The country that came out at the top was the United States. And today, that the notion of governments being ready is something that we assumed, but governments around the world, whether they're developed countries, developing countries, emerging countries, have really faced a major challenge. And I think it's very important for all of us to recognize that. So that's my first point. The assumption that governments were ready is not right, and we take the example of the country that was seemed to be most ready. Second is that different governments took a very different approach to this engagement. So in the United States, which is a federal country, the central government gave much more. A country like India, which the union responded in the initial months and created a national lockdown, whereas in the United States, lockdowns and choices were left to the state governments. In between, you have a country like Sweden, decided that it was going to leave it up to the citizens to decide whether they would go into a lockdown or not. So what I'm trying to say is this pandemic forced different countries to actually look at their relationship with their citizens and states in very, very different ways. There was no one solution. So that's my second point. My third point is this is a dynamic story where we constantly need to learn, adapt, and adjust. So Kerala is now facing a major second wave, maybe a third wave. Lot of people have come back to Kerala from abroad, and it's been a very difficult transition. So one mustn't look at any one approach as the solution. One must learn how the approach is working, how it's adjusting and responding. I think that becomes very important. Fourth is, we've seen around the world, countries have taken some common approach. First is, everyone addressed the health shock through health measures, naturally. But one of the peculiarities of the health measure was you needed to create social distancing and, in fact, slowing down the economy in order to try to flatten the curve. It's the first time that a shock actually gets governments to say we're going to slow down the economy. Now, this is quite unprecedented in the history of economic management. As a result of which governments around the world invested in social protection in order to bridge the support to poor and vulnerable during this slowdown. And then the third element was supporting the economic basis of the economy, mainly small and medium enterprise. So the sequence, health, social protection, small and medium enterprise, has been the general approach that has been taken. Now, critical is that the slowdown was to create the space so that measures could be taken on the ground to prepare for when the economy would be reopened, because you could not hold back the economy. Neither can you hold it back in the United States, nor can you hold it back in a country like Bangladesh or India, where so many people are at the poverty and sheer survival basis. So you had to reopen. So that was a time you had to flatten it. Unfortunately, many countries did not respond with the right measures. Now I come finally to your presentation, Bodil Bhai. There is no doubt that everyone agrees that the state and citizens must work hand in hand to tackle this crisis. And if the state is going to work with citizen, the best level of state that is closest to the citizen has to be strengthened, and that's local governments, what we call Staniyo Sarkar in Bangladesh. Bangladesh has a history of Union Porishad, Paurasabha. This is the panchayats of India and the ULB, urban local bodies of India, the counterpart. Our union porishads have had a long history of being the front line of food assistance, being the front line of response to natural disasters. And Bangladesh has one of the most impressive storylines of how to deal with natural disasters. You know, our disaster of 1970 has never been repeated again in Bangladesh. And that is to the credit of government as a system. But the other part that Bangladesh has is our communities, right? Our communities and community organizations are incredible. Whether you look at an organization, the NGO organization, entity like BRAC, we have extremely strong centers of community organization. I'm just concluding by saying that you're right, that it is the local government and the citizens' engagement that has to be strengthened. But Badiul Bhai, you yourself said Rome is not built in a day. Countries that don't have that from years on can't invent it in 1 minute. So it is something that we've got to come together all together. And the test for us across India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal is, can we come together as government, citizens, and communities to make the way forward? So I don't take it as a failure or success. I take it as a challenge of how these partners can come together. And that's what I take away as the big message from your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Preeta, it's...
Thanks a lot, Badiul Bhai, to Junaid. Very good interventions that complemented, the hyper-local strategy that went national in a way in Bangladesh, looking at experiences of other countries, tying it up with also what's at this moment being confronted in Kerala. There are a lot of questions coming, so I'll just deep dive into those. Quite a lot of the questions relate to the Kerala experience. We will have another webinar on that. This would not be a good opportunity to discuss the Kerala experience. We can bring back the Kerala Institute of Local Administration. And I mean, we do have representatives in this webinar also from there, but I think we should stick to the experience that we are discussing through this webinar. But there is a lot of questions on the communication strategy, the fact that it was a campaign. How could you go ahead with a campaign strategy given all those restrictions? And related to that, what was the role of civil administration in all this? I mean, we spoke of society, we spoke of local government, civil administration. And how did you plan a campaign strategy given all these restrictions?
Thank you. The one advantage we have is that we have volunteers who are local. They are villagers themselves. So the volunteers in the villages mobilize the other people. So keeping the distancing, social distancing or the physical distancing and wearing masks, they mobilized other people. So we didn't go from outside and hold meetings and like that. And people use phone and other devices. So it's the local people mobilizing the local people for doing something about it to protect themselves and protect their loved ones. And we try to involve the civil administration, and in some places they are involved. But if the government comes forward, it's easier for civil administration to be involved. But we are using the community clinics and the other facilities available locally to facilitate our work. So it's the local people taking the initiative. And we are, fortunately, we had this network of volunteers and the structures, local structures who could carry on the work they have been doing, now focusing on the containing this virus.
Okay, so there are two linked questions to that. One, of course, is what is the scaling up strategy? I mean, do you see this going larger, bigger? Are you communicating in any way with the national government to look at what are the lessons from here, what can be leveraged from this experience? And another question relating to scaling up or expanding is there a strategy of local governments becoming peer to other local governments where, this campaign is just being initiated? Are they hand-holding and, instead of the volunteers, then local governments coming into the center of a scaling up strategy? And is there any dialogue with the national government around this experience and its lessons?
We are trying. Unfortunately, the government has decided to go it alone, basically. And we feel that it should be a multi-stakeholder initiative. And the voluntary sector needs to be involved, as well as the private sector need to be involved. Even the political parties, politicians need to be involved. It will have to be a national campaign. So we have been involving the local government, but I think if the government wants to come forward, and in fact, government sidestepped in a sense the local government. The government designated a senior government official for each district. So if to upscale it, the government need to come forward and bring all the stakeholders together and then we can upscale it. I don't think we'll be able to upscale up to maybe 2,000 villages or so. We don't have the volunteers, but if there is a partnership with the government and other civil society organization, voluntary organization, and the private sector, will be able to upscale it nationwide. And in fact, some experts who joined us here feel that if this initiative is expanded in every village and every community in the urban areas, we could bring this virus under control in a month. Dr. Mushtaq Hussain, he's an advisor to the IECDR. He in writing he said that, and there are other people who feel that way. So we are trying to approach the government. We have not made headways yet, and we are working with BRAC and whether we can work together. If we can all work together, maybe we can upscale it and deal with this pandemic more effectively.
There is a very specific question on this practice. Are there experiences of volunteer groups focusing on high incidence of domestic violence? I think what it hints at is really when the issues were, kind of prioritized for these volunteer committees to kind of address, did issues that were hyper-local and very specific to that local context gain precedence, and issues of domestic violence then, kind of emerge as something to be addressed by particular volunteer committees?
See, one advantage we have these volunteer groups, village development teams and the self-help groups. They have been working there against all these issues, including violence, including child marriage. So this is continuation of their work. And also the most important way to contain these, prevent these, is social pressure. If the community comes together, we will not, and declares that we will not allow violence against women, we will not allow child marriage, and that will stop. We are mobilizing the community to make that happen. So as a result, it has not been a serious problem. There are isolated incidents, but not a serious problem because we have been working on it for quite some time, and the communities are together and making sure that these things do not happen.
There's a question from Nepal, Badiul Bhai, which talks of continuation of supply chains. Was that addressed in any way by this group? Leveraging all this work that had got invested in organizing communities, did it play out then in, kind of other issues which you had not looked at because it required scale and a different kind of logistics organization? The issue of continuation of supply chain and decision making, during the lockdown. And a related question from the same participant from Nepal is, what was a good resource mobilization strategy that you saw?
Okay. See, that's why if we are to make sure that the economic lifeline is functioning, we need multi-stakeholders intervention. We need government's intervention. But having said that, we must say that people need to be healthy to continue their economic activities and continue the supply chain functional. So we have been focusing in making sure that people don't get infected, and people who get infected, they don't infect other people, and also they get emergency support. And the government needed to be involved. And the last part of the mobilization of the resources, we have been doing it for quite some time, the community philanthropy. We have been trying to bring the forces of good. The good young people have been playing the most important role in this initiative. They have been mobilizing the villagers, well-to-do, and people even not living in the villages. So you need to have a group of people who have credibility, and also this will have to be a society-wide initiative, and also this needs to be transparent. The effort needs to be transparent, and then you will succeed. We have good track record. So we have been able to, our volunteers have been able to mobilize the resources quickly to stand by the people who are in distress.
There's an interesting question, and a lot of questions actually are hinting towards challenges that you would have been confronted in when you took this campaign forward. There's one about the entire politics of prioritizing issues, of identifying the marginalized whose issues need to be kind of addressed more quickly. So it's really who prepared the lists of the poor, the jobless, those needing these resources that are being collected, and who is really prioritizing the issues that need to be kind of addressed on a more quick basis. on a more immediate basis in the local context?
See, we are supplementing the government. It's the government's role. And the government, as I said, that deputed senior officials to create these lists and oversee these activities. Local government is involved, but it's not in the forefront. And so we are supplementing. And there are accusations, there are allegations of corruption and people left out. So we are trying to identify the people who are left out, who are deserving, who qualify to get those support, government support, to be under those protection schemes. So we try to identify those, and since we have good relationship with the local government bodies and the other functionaries also, our volunteers gave the list and also negotiated or do the advocacy so that those people who are deserving included. We are not the one who is making the list for the government. Government has been doing the list. We are supplementing.
Yeah, I'll just direct the attention of everyone towards a comment from the country director, World Bank, Junaid Ahmed, also about this really well worked out system of block grants that has, emerged over more than 10 to 15 years. First at a pilot stage, then upscaling, and now the entire country is, kind of covered by it. More or less, the Ministry of Finance, Government of Bangladesh has taken it over. It's totally mainstreamed in their system, and how that could be an effective tool in providing support and, kind of being, making sure that the local governments are responsive to the immediate priorities. There's a comment there that participants can read. Now, a question on volunteerism. What is the incentive? How do you sustain interest, energies in this?
That is a best kept secret, unfortunately. And we have been very, very successful. Voluntarism has been destroyed. Voluntarism has been destroyed by the donors, by even the voluntary organizations have destroyed the voluntarism. But we have, from early on, from the 90s, when I got involved, we decided that it will have to be labor of love. And the volunteers made Bangladesh liberated, risking their lives. So Bangladeshis can do necessary things. So what is needed to be done to make Bangladesh prosper, Bangladesh move forward. So we have developed a very unique training and empowerment curriculum, which works. And thousands of people work with us voluntarily. It's a labor of love. You cannot really, there's no magic formula that you can train and empower volunteers and keep them engaged. We have been doing it and we have learned it and we know how it works. And if anybody is interested in Bangladesh, we will be happy to work with them and help them mobilize the volunteers. But their structure, you see, another thing, we try to work with other organizations and we provide a training for them, but their structure will have to be such that it empowers the volunteers to follow up the volunteers. So your structure, our national structure will have to be conducive.
So it's interesting that you bring this up because there are a few requests to look at the modules that have been developed and whether they would lend themselves to other contexts, training stuff relating to the pandemic, to simplifying it, the practice, the good practice, and whatever else that you may have developed as communication material. If it could be available to others, there's requests from Nepal, and I think one came up from Afghanistan also. There's a question about how are you evaluating this? Where are you able to see corrections that need to be made? Managing that in a campaign that's underway, or talking of a significant scale, how are corrections made? And more than that, how do you get the information back on what needs to change, what needs to be modified, adapted?
Okay, thank you. The request for help, sharing the module, we can share the module, but that I must say that it would not really work. If you're interested, contact us, maybe send one or two people, really experience it. You'll have to experience it. That's what, but we'll be happy to help and we'll be happy to share the module with you.
That's excellent. That's really nice because there's a lot of people hinting, I mean, not a lot, but yeah, we've got comments about cross-border support.
Yeah, sure.
Given its login, I guess that would emerge.
And with regard to evaluation, by the way, there is no fund transfer. There is no, it's not a NGO work. It's the volunteers' work and their labor of love. And as I said, that we have structured in the villages, the village development team. They are the ones who are really driving the whole activities, and they decide based on their experience what is working, what is not working. And then they take the corrective steps. For example, initially, we are not really the misinformation, disinformation. That really, we didn't think that that was very serious. But through experience, we realized that that became the most important stumbling block. And then they started mobilizing the imams and the other religious leaders and who could give sermons and really dispel some of the misinterpretation of the religion. It's learning by doing. No formal mechanism for evaluating, and also we almost every week this is a decentralized activities in a decentralized manner. We have some skeleton staff throughout the country, and technology now. This is one of the benefits of this pandemic. Using this technology, although there are limitations, they are discussing and sharing with the volunteers. And in fact, some leaders of the voluntary sectors also took the initiative, and some of the distinguished people who joined us have been involved in discussions, the dialogue with the volunteers. So we have been holding dialogues with the volunteers, with the distinguished people, as well as with our staff also discussing with them and sharing. They are sharing, and one is learning from another. So this is how it's going on.
So there's also a request from Mongolia for, getting more information on the volunteer training and sustaining interest.
Sure.
There is an intervention from Kila, from Kerala, saying online volunteer training is possible. I think at a later moment, we will focus on that. I mean, I wanted to understand from you. You said mobile phones, etc. But was there a whole community of volunteers that was connecting with each other during this campaign, during this whole experience? Or was it really like a pyramid, kind of a few contact points, then reaching out to other volunteers? So some kind of a hierarchy.
After the pandemic hit, and everybody was immobilized and didn't know what to do. So initially started a few people and in the villages, and they started. See, the people were not sure whether anything could be done, and the technology is unfamiliar, and many of them don't have the smartphone or the access to internet. It's increasing. The access to internet and the access to mobile phone is increasing. So it's gradually expanding. Started a few in each village. They made the village development team active and self-help groups, those people and the other volunteers active. So it's expanding. Okay. And it's a whole society approach, and we are trying to mobilize the whole community.
So, Dr. Badula, what I wanted to ask you was, as we reach the end of this webinar, if there were three things that you would want to kind of give as main takeaways that other civil society organizations or local governments could take into account in their context. Of course, there's a lot about, initiating volunteerism, but beyond that, what are the three things that consistently they need to look out for to kind of put the citizens and local governments more at the center of the strategy, of the response strategy?
The first most important thing, I think, may bring home the realization that this is in their self-interest. There's a strong incentive here. If you protect your neighbors, if you protect the other people in the community, you protect yourself and your ones. So it will all in it together. That's the realization. And unfortunately, in our country, we haven't come to that realization. We are all in it together. So the first thing is all in it together, and that galvanized. And the second thing is the local government, the local leadership. Local leadership is very, very important in this. So involvement of the local government and empowering the local government to take the leadership at the local level. So it will have to be decentralized. In other words, decentralized. And the third thing is trust deficit. You will have to have a trusting relationship between, Junaid said that a relationship between the citizens and the government. So it will have to be a relationship of trust, confidence, and people need to be taken into confidence. And it will have to be both at the locally as well as at the nationally. all in it together. And so we'll have to work together, and then we'll succeed. So these are the three things that come from the top of my mind, top of my head.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just a mention on, because it's repeatedly been asked and you've referred to it, but I think it might be worthwhile to just focus once more. Collaborations across institutions. BRAC has come up, and this whole discussion about how the social capital that has been invested upon in Bangladesh in the many decades, the high civil society action there has been leveraged at this time and has come of use also in this campaign. Any initiatives on the part of Shujan Hunger Project to join hands with larger initiatives and take this experience forward as a strategy to scale
Well,
up?
there are some experts here. There are some government representatives here, advisors, and we have been in communication with them. And they realize that what we are doing has potential. So we are trying our best to try to make inroads with the government. And also we are in communication, we are in conversation with BRAC. So hopefully something will materialize. And it will have to be a national effort. This is one of the most serious emergencies we have faced in a century. Definitely a bigger emergency, perhaps in a sense different way. Our War of Liberation was an emergency for Bangladesh. For the humanity, this is the biggest challenge we face. So we need to work together. We need to do it together. We are pursuing as much as we can. I hope the government will realize that we need to work together, and we are in it together.
Thank you. There are a lot of requests for links, for material, and your colleague at Project has also offered that if emails could be shared, then material will be provided. My request is, and I've written it in the chat also, the Login Secretariat will seek out this material and will make sure that it's made available as annexures and as links to the two-pager that we'll bring out from this webinar. It'll be available through the weekly update, etc. I mean, the usual channels that the Secretariat uses. So this is my opportunity to thank Hunger Project, to thank Dr. Junaid Ahmed, to thank all the participants for coming into this webinar. It's been a good discussion. It's sparked some thought on how else it can be done, how it doesn't need a very centralized approach always. I think if anything, this experience has to look at our workers who need to be more at the center of the response strategy. This experience kind of confirms that, validates that as well. This is my moment to thank everyone. Goodbye. And
yes, please. I want to thank Login and yourself, and also Junaid. Junaid is a star. He's a Bangladeshi, those of you who don't know. And he's head of the World Bank, and he's a great supporter of our work. And thank you, Junaid. And you made very, very useful supplement, and thank all your colleagues, and thank everybody who joined. I'm sorry that we took more time than we intended.
No, that's okay. That's not so much extra time. Thank you. Goodbye, and see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.